Hello and welcome everyone to the Industrial Energy Efficiency webinar. Thank you very much for joining. Just to give you a background to what we hope to do today, and I'll go through the agenda in a second. This webinar will last roughly an hour. We'll probably take about 35 to 40 minutes on the formal presentation, and we will have time for questions. This session will be recorded and available on the Carbon Trust website in due course, and to all the attendees participating today, we will send out the slides. So my name is Al-Karim Govinji, and I'm the project manager for this program that's being run or funded by BEIS, and we will have a number of others, or a couple of others on the call as well, who will be speaking in various sections. So to move through to the agenda, before I go to the agenda, just wanted to give you an update or an overview of the team that's working on this program. The program, as I mentioned, is funded by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and is led there by Phil Cohen, who is on the line and will just give us a brief introduction to the program now.
Thanks, Al-Karim, and thanks for taking the time to join us on this webinar. The Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator is an important program for government, as it brings forward the technologies that will enable UK industry to remain competitive, while at the same time decarbonising and helping us meet our 2050 targets. It forms part of the bigger program of the industrial strategy, which is the government's long-term vision for the UK. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Phil, for that. So the program itself is being run by the Carbon Trust and managed by us. We are also partnering and supported from a technical perspective by Jacobs, which is the primary technical support to us on the program, and Andrew Moore is the lead there with Simon Inc. And then Amic Foster Wheeler is also providing support, technical support on the program, and Chris Green there is supporting us there. You will see a number of names here from the Carbon Trust supporting this program, and in addition to me today, Guy Henley will also be speaking about the competition part when we get there in the agenda. So just to provide an overview of the Industrial Energy Efficiency Accelerator, the IEEA, as you can see, it's funded, and as we've discussed, it's funded by the BEIS, and BEIS have a number of key objectives, and the program have a number of key objectives. The first is really driving industrial competitiveness in the UK, and this is a real key driver for BEIS and a key driver for the program. It's the key rationale, I guess, for why we are running these demonstration projects around these innovation technologies. Decarbonisation, of course, of UK industry is also paramount in that discussion. The second key thing here is to facilitate projects to be able to test near market technologies. And so we're looking at TRLs of technology readiness levels of 6 to 8, things which are typically pre-commercial, and there are some nuances to that, and we'll come to those a little bit later on in the presentation. And the final thing really is to leverage private sector and to promote private sector investment in these technologies, both from the perspective of the industrial site that's going to deploy these technologies and projects, but also from the technology developer to try and engage them and to promote them and their activities to drive ultimately sales of their technologies, both in the UK but potentially overseas. And the program has a total value of 9.2 million, and it's going to be run over the next 4 years up till 2021. It is technology agnostic, and so we're not targeting necessarily specific innovations in specific sectors, but clearly the actual projects will be run on specific sites in particular sectors. But the lens from which we're looking at this is not necessarily on a sector lens, and that's something to highlight at this point. We are going to look at a range of different technologies and innovation projects and with the capability potentially to be deployed across sectors where that's possible. And of course, if you deploy it across sectors, then the potential energy savings and carbon impact can be much greater. So why is the IEEA needed? Previous work indicated that there was great value and UK industry valued competitiveness, but clearly barriers exist. And part of the rationale, or the key rationale for this funding or co-funding that's being made available by BEIS, is to try and overcome these barriers. And we've identified 3 sets of barriers, which you'll all be very familiar with, but still continue to be a challenge for industry. The first is the operational risk. What we're saying is there's often a greater focus on best practices than innovations. Best practices are clearly, in many cases, better known, easier to do, often have lower paybacks. And so there is a tendency for management to focus on those as the first course of action, and innovations may not be the primary focus. And secondly, innovations tend to be done in new build plants, and retrofitting technologies is often harder to do, has the risks of product changes, and there's clearly concern from the industrial sites to deploy those. So there's an operational risk that needs to be overcome. The second one is the capital constraints. Industry often prioritizes growth projects, things that will expand the plant production, increase revenues, or more traditional operational efficiency projects that drive down costs in a more traditional way than through energy savings. And so there's an educational aspect there where finance directors and others in companies perhaps have a preference of certain projects types over others. The second thing is that these projects can cost hundreds of thousands, and in many cases much more than that. And so the financial barrier is often significant, particularly in sectors where the profit margins are really tight, people are going through economic difficult times, and so these may not be the priorities for that particular sector or company. And the focus may be much more on sustaining the business and maintaining it rather than focusing on innovations. And the final area here is knowledge and deployment, or knowledge of deployment even. And there is sometimes less awareness around the technologies that could be deployed which are innovative. Best practices are often well known and documented, and innovations by their nature not being commercial yet, not having the test cases where they've been deployed in specific sectors, clearly the knowledge gap there is much more significant. And sometimes innovations are deployed in the similar sectors or in other sister sectors internationally or in the UK, but not always known. And so there is a need to bring some of those potential technologies and awareness raised of those to other sectors. How will the IEA benefit you? And there are 2 key, I guess, stakeholders here in terms of the end beneficiaries. There are many other stakeholders like trade associations, but the key financial beneficiaries in this program are going to be the industrial companies that actually deploy the innovations on their sites, which can help them to reduce their energy costs and hence become much more competitive. And clearly there's a reputational impact there of undertaking innovation that potentially others in your sector may not have done. And for technology developers, this is an opportunity for them to do 2 things really. One is to find a potential customer for their emerging technology, and so the program will bring parties together both in workshops, in online information that we provide, to really provide an opportunity for developers to meet industrial partners where they could potentially deploy their technology. And the second thing this program gives them is consulting incubation support. So the Carbon Trust will provide all successful project technology developers with incubation support to really help them to commercialize their technology. And one of the key drivers of BEIS is to see these technologies develop and taken to market as quickly as possible once they have been tested. So that's the second area of support for the technology developers, which is really important and hopefully can really help the technology developers move quickly to pre-commercial to post-commercial. Now, UK trade associations in the past work that we've done, and the Carbon Trust, as many of you will know, ran a similar program previously, valued this type of support, as did member companies. Trade associations are really important in this whole exercise. They're really the channel to market in many ways. They're the ones who, across the different sectors, know their members. They often have the meetings and the environmental sessions quarterly with their member companies, where some of these best practices and innovations are often explored. And so they're a really important stakeholder group for us. And we've been actively engaging in the past 6 weeks or so with pretty much all the trade associations that are represented within the heavy industries and the mid-energy intense sectors, where the likely savings are going to be significant. So what you see here is a smattering of quotes from various trade associations which point to the need to deploy innovation to drive competitiveness, the need for financial support to de-risk some of these projects, and really to try and encourage bringing the technology developers closer to industry so that those technologies are known, where the industrial companies may not always be fully aware of all that's going on in the marketplace, particularly the stuff that is pre-commercial. And so hopefully this program provides an opportunity for us to bring those technologies and the awareness of those technologies to industrial sites. So moving on to the next section, which will give us a little bit more information about the program and its focus and the way that it's planned to be run. This is quite a busy slide, so I'll take you through this step by step. If you focus on the top section first, the 4 chevrons you see at the top labeled 1 to 4, this is the general structure of the program and the key activities that will be undertaken over the 4 years of the program. The first is the stakeholder engagement piece, and this is really important, and this is the activity we've been doing up to now, engaging with trade associations, trying to provide some thoughts and direction around the types of projects that could ultimately be run. And so we've been talking to all these trade associations, engaging with you, running past with them the technologies that we think are close to market, that can have an impact, many of which may have cross-sectoral potential. And these are being forwarded to member companies in those trade associations for their feedback as well. Some of that feedback we received last year in some of the work we did for BEIS then, particularly around the mid-energy intense sectors. We have some of that information, but clearly things move on and new technologies emerge. This is an exercise of really understanding what else is out there that may be considered, that industry knows about, or industrial companies know about, or potentially inviting the technology developer community to put forward new ideas to ones that we had previously looked at. And that will culminate in this phase in August and September, where we will run a number of workshops, and we'll talk a lot about those and the timing of those towards the end of the presentation. But at that workshop, there'll be an opportunity to bring industrial companies together across sectors to present to them groupings of technologies that we've identified, or the industry themselves or the technology developer community have identified, that give them a chance to provide some thought as how to take these different projects or technologies and move them into actual projects. And this is a key emphasis to be made here. We're not being limited by technology. We really want to move this program into actual projects. And we'll talk about what a project is, but essentially it's an industrial company with a technology developer coming forward and presenting an idea of a near-market technology that needs to be deployed or could be deployed. So that's what we want to get to, is these partnerships. And this first phase is really engaging with industry to ensure that they're aware of the program, give them a range of technologies that could potentially be deployed, but they can come back with totally different technologies. These are just areas of potential technology deployment, and they're not restrictive in any means, they're not supposed to be so. And so they're very open to other things being presented. The second phase, the second point, is the competitions themselves. So during this phase, which will last typically, well, in this phase will last from the end of August, early September to the end of January next year. So a 4-month window for when the competition is formally released and opened, where it's an opportunity for industrial partners and technology developers to partner up, to find what they want to deploy, and to submit proposals to the Carbon Trust to receive that funding or co-funding for those projects. The next phase, phase 3 or step 3, is really the demonstration project and stimulating uptake. So this is where, once the award of the funding has been made, the project teams are then kicked off and the technologies are deployed on industrial sites, and there's a process of engaging with those project partners, ensuring the project is moving ahead, the milestones are being made, assess how the success of those projects are in terms of energy savings and carbon savings, and culminating from that will be a case study which all the applicants will be required to support the development of. And really it's on the back of that and dissemination of those to the rest of industry where the uptake can come and where the real energy savings can be unearthed, not just from one company deploying it, but from other members in that particular sector, other companies in that sector, but other sectors as well. Picking up what's been done in one sector where the proof point has been shown, and then other sectors feel that there is confidence that they too can pick up that technology, which is now effectively a best practice because it's been demonstrated once. And then in parallel with that is this incubation support I mentioned earlier. Very important for technology startups in particular, and startup companies often struggle to find customers, to really think about their technology, the IP protection. We'll talk a little bit more about that type of incubation support a little bit later. So that will run in parallel to the technology demonstrations. So that's the overall shape of the program and the different elements of it. The chart underneath identifies and takes those 4 steps and really splits the program into 2. And there is a phase 1 and a phase 2. And the idea of these phases is really to provide a test point or a measurement and an outcomes assessment for BEIS to indicate, hopefully, that the program is being successful, that demonstrations are going to plan, that there are some which are proving to be very successful, that energy savings are possible, that carbon can be saved, that other industries look like that they would want to pick these technologies up. So at some point in year 2 of the program, let's say around January 2019, once the projects have been running for 12 months or so, there will be a point where we will evaluate how those projects have gone. At that point, if the findings are good, then hopefully BEIS will make available to move that project to phase 2 and continue the program. The funding allocation across these 2 phases is not fixed at this point. So I mentioned to you the 9.2 million overall program value. We will allocate funding in phase 1 to projects that merit them, so that it is possible that a chunk of money could be spent in phase 1. So we encourage applications early in phase 1 rather than wait for phase 2, but it's likely there will be funding available for phase 2 as well, to continue these projects and to continue these demonstrations. But we must, of course, make that case to BEIS that the impacts have been strong and solid. So hopefully that just gives you a sense of the phasing. I wouldn't get too worried about the phasing. The key thing is the timings of these things. And step 1 is what we're going through now, and we're doing the stakeholder engagement, and we'll have the workshops. Step 2, the running of the competition, likely from September up till the end of January, and then we moved into project deployment in steps 3 and 4 for phase 1 towards the middle and end of year 3. So hopefully that gives you a flavor for the structure of the program. But again, if you have more specific questions on that, we can certainly pick those up. So in terms of the competition process, as I mentioned, the documentation should be released on the Carbon Trust IEEA website to the end of August, where you'll have the application form and the guidance documents, which will include various eligibility criteria and assessment criteria. And the key success factor, I guess, for being selected to deploy these projects and to receive co-funding is the impact, the energy savings potential and carbon savings potential in the UK. It's not the only factor. There will be other factors in terms of how likely is it that the technology will be replicated, is the cost or overall project value fit within the window of this programmatic funding. So clearly projects which are 5 million are probably not likely to be entertained. We will give some indication of the range of co-funding that typically projects could receive. But we're very open, and if some projects are deemed to be a little bit on the expensive side, but where the impact can be proven by the applicants to be very, very strong in terms of overall absolute impact to the UK, then there can be a case to be made that those projects should be funded. And the application will require detail on who the partners are from the industrial side, from the technology developer side, other partners you may be using, what's the implementation plan, how will you measure and baseline and then assess the impact post-project. So do you have metering in place or plan to do so? What are the milestones to receiving payments? How are you going to mitigate risks to your processes and to overall project risks? So that will all come in the application process. And the key thing, again, to reiterate, project applications need to come from a combination of an industrial company with a technology developer who will put forward a joint application, and both can then receive co-funding depending on the eligibility criteria, which we will now cover. So just to talk briefly about this fast-track process. So whilst I mentioned the formal competition window is late August, early September to the end of January for phase 1, one thing we're really keen to do is, and BEIS is very keen to happen, is for projects where the parties have already know of potential ideas and projects, where industrial company already knows a technology it wishes to deploy, and who already got a developer in mind, technology developer in mind. We're very keen for ready projects to come forward to us where the case can be made that the co-funding is required, and the idea is to kick off some projects quicker so that make sure that the stage gate we talked about at the end of phase 1 can be brought forward potentially. So we're very keen for technologies to be demonstrated and for projects to come forward as quickly as possible. So if you're in that situation, do come talk to us so that we can give you some advice on how to submit your application as soon as possible. And the selection criteria for those will not be different from the regular competition. The only thing that changes is the partners are already defined. We're project ready today as opposed to waiting for the workshops, waiting for the competition documents. Of course, you'll need those anyway, but waiting for the formal launch of the competition. So I'll hand over now to Guy Henley, who will take us through some of the more detail on the eligibility and competition rules.
Hello, everyone. As my colleague Al-Karim noted, there are some basic pre-requirements that have to be fulfilled. Firstly, the demonstration site has to be located within the UK. We're looking to focus specifically on high and medium energy intensity sectors. Co-funding obviously is an absolute must, and you must sort of demonstrate the energy and sort of carbon to mitigation potential. We're looking specifically towards technologies that are closer towards the commercial or technology readiness level, and we're looking for both novel technologies but also novel applications of any other particular technology. So to say if a technology has been applied in another sector but it's can be used within a new sector to reduce or increase impact, then that will be accepted as well. Lastly, we are technology neutral, so we're welcoming all sorts of applications, and the technology cannot be already used in the demonstration sector in the UK. In terms of how much funding you're eligible for, we are bound by EU state aid guidance. So all individual UK businesses, universities or consortiums may apply for a grant. As I said, the maximum funding intensity is capped by EU state guidance. This funding intensity is based on eligible costs for the research, development and innovation categorization as indicated within EU and UK state aid guidance. This allowable funding broadly supports the following. Effectively, the smaller sized company you are, the more funding you are eligible for, and the amount of funding you are eligible for decreases the larger you are. The second broad categorization is the earlier the stage of technology development or / research, the more funding you're eligible for. Finally, there are particular uplifts available for collaborations. The presented figures here in this table are the maximum intensities. However, given the limited budget overall, the maximum cap could be reduced based on the perceived value of, for money of the projects, and also to ensure that we can support the most high-impact projects possible. All this will be further detailed and clarified within the invitation to tender documents. And if you are wanting more information specifically, please do go and see all publicly available documents that are available, specifically the UK Government State Aid Manual would be a good start to discover and understand more about the particular funding eligibility requirements.
Thank you, Guy. Slide 13 then is the incubation support I mentioned earlier. This is directed to the technology developer as part of the project support that the Carbon Trust will provide. And it takes a number of different forms, but in essence, the aim of the whole process is to try and support the developer to commercialize its technologies. And the 3 steps we show here are the development of an initial incubation support plan, delivering that incubation support, and then really looking at trying to prepare that company to scale up this new development or this new technology it has created, such that that technology is available in large scale to a number of different companies, potentially to other sectors, and of course potentially for export as well. So a number of different areas of support are highlighted underneath each of these 3 steps. And clearly the first thing is to just understand where the company is. Where is it in its commercialization process? Where would we expect a typical company at its TRL level for that technology? Where would we expect it to be around some of the metrics you see in number 2? So, you know, is the team structure where we would expect it to be? Does he have the CTO in the right place, etc.? Does he have the expertise that's required? Do they have a sales plan? Is the investor plan in terms of continuing to grow this business, is that correct? And so the first step, we'll just look at where the gaps are and define some discrete areas of support that can be delivered in step 2. And step 2 across these different areas is then to provide that support where we will engage actively with the company and its various staff to look at a number of these different areas around IP protection, market sizing, looking at potential customers and acquisition thereof, looking at the technology, and is it protected or is it the right technology, are you addressing the right sector, looking at supply chain and how you get your product to market, etc. So there's a number of different areas of support that could be provided, and that's it will be a subset of that most likely, where in step 1 we would have defined what those areas are. And the final thing, which is the support through the demonstration part of the project in parallel, we'll also start to look at scale up and see how do you actually get your technology once it's demonstrated, where the proof cases are right, in terms of the literature you need to produce. You've done a case study, but how do you then build that out? Who do you need to reach out to? Is there some PR that needs to be done? And really, how do you access the financing necessary for the company to scale up and reach the expectations of industrial companies, who often, of course, are sometimes a little bit wary of buying technologies or demonstrating technologies from smaller companies, and maybe they're more used to buying it from the more established, larger equipment suppliers. So clearly there's a lot of support that could be provided, and we would actively provide the technology developer in this program. So in terms of case studies, I just wanted to present here a couple of projects that we had funded in the past IEEA, just to give you a flavor of the types of things that we're looking for in the success of some of these projects. Ice pigging is one that was demonstrated in the dairy sector, and low temperature asphalt in the aggregate sector. And for the first one, in terms of low temperature asphalt, the idea was that cleaning of pipes in between runs of different products, so where a dairy runs or processes milk and then does custard and then does another cheese, for example, will need to clean that pipe in between those runs to make sure that the product is free from the previous product that was running through it. And so typically hot water and caustics are used to clean those pipes in between runs. The idea here from the University of Bristol, which was at an early stage, was that maybe using ice slurries was a better way and a more efficient way and potentially environmentally friendlier way of doing so. And so various tests they'd done in their labs meant they felt confident to come forward to us to submit an application to say we want to demonstrate this in industry. And they brought with them a couple of industrial partners, Yo Valley and BV Dairy, and tested their technology developed in their labs in those industrial settings. And on the back of those demonstrations, we saw significant benefits in terms of annual savings achieved of 132,000 per year per site, significant savings of water use, and ultimately of carbon as well. And so there was a really good case there of a university idea that moved and demonstrated the technology in an industrial setting, and subsequently that technology has been purchased by a global equipment supplier called Suez, who is now marketing that product internationally. So a real great case study of early stage technology moving to commercialization, which is exactly what we want here. And in that project, we also provided the University of Bristol and their spin-out company with some incubation support as well, to really try and make sure that they get the most value from selling that technology. The next case study is in the aggregate sector, where Lafarge Tarmac partnered with 9S as well as with Atkins to really look at the way that you can make aggregates and bind them with the bitumen at lower temperatures than what you would typically do at some 180 odd degrees. And so they produced a mix and manufactured that on their site at significantly lower temperatures, and the outcome of that was potential savings of 259,000 tons of carbon, energy savings for them, and great benefit in terms of overall environmental impact. The road there you see is in Leicestershire, and you see that it was laid with the traditional and conventional hot asphalt as well as the reduced temperature one, and the performance of that road over that time since 2012 when that was demonstrated has been very good. And so again, a real good example there of moving technology forward. And the key thing there is that others have then, other local authorities have seen this being demonstrated and are also keen and have signed up to various different targets for deploying low temperature asphalt. So there's just a couple of examples of where partners came together, brought an idea to us for funding potential, which was ultimately funded and demonstrated with significant impact. Now, one thing to just mention here, it's clear that not every technology will work. The mere fact that these are earlier stage, they're close to commercial, so they've had a level of testing in the lab and in other prototype settings. We know that not everyone will work, and BEIS is very aware that these technologies don't always work 100% of the time. And so that's something for the partners to reflect on and consider, and make sure they find ways of de-risking it for their plant so there's no impact of projects that don't work. But there's no immediate penalty per se from BEIS for not proving that the project saves carbon or energy, which is really the key driver is for competitiveness. So we want people to be open to these new ideas, not to feel that they are going to be beholden to certain energy savings levels. Clearly the application must specify what the expectations are, and that will come from the previous studies that have been done, that the technology developer has done, your own industrial assessment of the potential savings, and so that should all come through in the application process. But we're fully aware and cognizant that certain technologies have or may not demonstrate the type of savings that they were initially hoped for. But as long as the project moves along with what was originally set out, any risks have been highlighted through the project, and people have been kept informed, that's the key thing. But clearly we want successful projects, because that's ultimately where the savings will come. So before I move to next steps, as it were, it's important to bear in mind that there are challenges here, both for the industrial company as well as the technology developer. Industrial companies finding suitable demonstrations that work for your site is clearly a challenge, and what I would suggest is attending the various workshops and brokerage sessions that we will make available to you is a good start. Look at the different technologies that we have highlighted and identified at a sector level that your trade associations hopefully are distributing to you, and you will have a view on some of that, whether those are relevant for you. The MRV component is very important, because the baseline for where you start off in your energy performance today versus once you've demonstrated the project and deployed that particular technology is important to make that case and to have the necessary metering in place to be able to do that. For the developer, finding a customer is often a big challenge, because industry is often resistant to new ideas because of the operational risk that we've already discussed. So ensuring that the developer provides sufficient comfort and confidence to the industrial plant where this is being deployed, through the risk assessments, through the quality of the previous studies and work that you've done, and the case studies that have been developed, or the prototyping, through the health and safety procedures that are undertaken. All of that will give comfort to the industrial partner. And clearly a lack of visibility of your technology to industry is often a challenge, particularly for startups. And so hopefully through the process that we're undertaking, the workshops, bringing partners together, potentially networking events, the forms that we have available on our website for developers to suggest technologies, hopefully that gives visibility to both parties of what's out there. I've mentioned the competition phase will kick off end of August, probably September. The fast track process will be open fairly soon once the competition documents are made available on our website. The thing to really focus your minds on now, apart from your thinking around projects that you would like to deploy, is the upcoming workshops. We've got 2 in August and 2 in September. You'll see the dates there on the slide in Manchester, London, Glasgow, and Birmingham. So we would strongly encourage your registration at the workshop that's most appropriate for you geographically. Each workshop will take a very similar format, so it doesn't matter which one you come to. The idea is to present you with more information about the program and the application process, to present with you an opportunity to meet other sectors who may well be interested in similar technology groupings. So for example, if someone's, we may have a grouping around heat, so it may well be the ceramic sector plus iron and steel, and cement may be very interested in the heat technologies that we present. So it'll be a chance for you to look at and hear about some of those potential technologies and projects that ultimately you would deploy, but also get a sense, or we will get a sense from those workshops of where cross-sectorial applications may be possible, which will clearly benefit the impact case. So there's more information on these links on our website. I mentioned the form that technology developers can submit. It's a 2-page form. They can submit as much of that information as they can, which will give us at the Carbon Trust an idea of the sorts of technologies that are out there, which we can try and then ensure to include in the workshops as potential ideas. And technology developers are also invited, of course, to these workshops, and there'll be different sections for the industrial partners, industrial players, as well as the technology developers, but there'll also be common sessions to bring them together, and potential matchmaking sessions at those workshops where industry can meet some of these technology developers. That's really all I wanted to say. So I would just say thank you to you all for your participation in the webinar. And we had a nice mix, in fact, of a range of players across, and stakeholders, from companies to technology developers to trade associations. So thank you very much for your participation. We'll now have a look through some of the questions that have come forward and try and address those now. So the first question was the question around distribution of emails of webinar attendees. Unfortunately, because of data protection, we can't do that. But what we would suggest is, if you come forward to us, if you have more specific questions, you may have a specific technology in mind, or you may be a technology developer with a sector in mind, then we can maybe start to engage with your counterpart or potential counterparts and try and introduce you that way on their agreement. So that's what I would suggest we do in the first instance on that. Another question was, how do you define an industrial company? Do you focus on funding on large users like factories, or could it be industrial companies likes of medium energy users like hotels or local authorities? So it's a fair question, and the audience really here is industrial companies, so manufacturers that manufacture something. We're not focusing here on specifically on public sector infrastructure, so we're not really looking at transport, we're not really looking at public buildings, we're not largely looking at buildings at all. So lighting applications, AC applications are out of scope for this program. It's very much process-related manufacturing where innovations can be deployed for energy savings within those contexts. What will happen in the case a company wants to protect its ideas from other companies? Will there be confidentiality with regards to the technology being presented at workshops? I'm assuming that that's coming from a technology developer. So the idea here is not to take IP. Clearly a technology developer has spent a lot of time developing its technology, it's worked on it, it's developed teams, and so the idea is not for this program to present the secret sauce, as we say, to other technology developers. At these workshops, technology developers are open to present what they want in terms of the technology. And I think the key thing for an industrial site is to know what the technology is, what it does, how much it will save, how it will be deployed. I don't think industrial companies will be as interested in the fundamentals of how that technology was created or developed. And of course, trying to maintain the IP of that technology from other technology developers will be fore of mind for the technology developer. And again, it's up to the technology developer to present at these workshops what they wish. In the application process, we would, of course, want as much information as possible, but that's going to be an application to a very limited audience of BEIS and the project team who will be evaluating these proposals. What I would say is, at the end of the project, it is important to be able to present this case study. And at that point, we would want as much information in the case study that shows how the project was deployed in an industrial site, broadly how the technology works and how it could be deployed on a site, what the overall impact was, and the statistics around the pre and post deployment impact. And so we need everything that gives others the comfort and the confidence to then go off and deploy that technology. We're not asking for the in-depth detail of how that technology was deployed. So I think IP will and can be and must be protected within the technology developer. Another question we have here is in relation to co-funding. Can you explain collaboration uplift in more detail? If you're an SME technology developer who's partnering with an industrial company on an experimental development project, are you entitled to co-funding of 60% as opposed to 40%. Different parties will get co-funding up to the relevant level for their size. So if a partnership is between an SME and a large company, in that table you'll have seen different values for each. And so it's something to remember that different parties, each party will then access the level of co-funding that it can get from that program, subject to these rules. Your question, I guess, goes on to say, if you're an SME technology developer who is partnering with an industrial company, an experimental development project, are you entitled to 60% co-funding as opposed to 45%? Yes, so because you're collaborating with an industrial partner, even if it's a large company, the fact of collaboration means you could potentially be eligible for that 60%, i.e. the uplift, if you're a small company, from 45% to 60%. And large companies, in that case, as part of that collaboration, can get the uplift from 25% to 40%, which is the eligibility. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that these are the maximum levels. That's not necessarily the amount you will get. It's the maximum you can be eligible to get. Ultimately, it will be a decision for BEIS and the evaluators for what they deem to be required for this program. And that might be based on assessments of the technology or on your capability to fund such a project. So hopefully that gives you some clarity on that one. Another question that's just come through: will further funding be considered in an instance where more potential for a technology is uncovered? So there are maximum limits to the amount of funding that can be provided, and this is based on EU state aid rules. So there will be a cap. So even if the potential is seen to be enormous, we can't circumvent the cap. So just to reiterate on that last question, there is quite a lot of co-funding available here, depending on your size. So I think, and depending on the stage of the technology is at. My assumption is most technologies will likely be in the experimental development category, which is the later stage technology. Industrial research tends to be earlier stage. But again, the program is not restrictive, but given we're looking at technologies that are closer to market, it's likely to be in the experimental development stage. But as I say, that's by no means a restrictive thing. Okay, a question around the fast track again. The idea there is really not to be restricted by the timeline that I've indicated for a fast track application. And really we want to encourage people who've already got ready ideas to install emerging technologies, that is the industrial company as well as the technology developer, to come to us as quickly as possible and say, look, this is the idea we have, this is where we want to deploy it, and to come up with the idea, and then we will take them through the application process and evaluate that application as soon as possible before the formal application deadlines. In terms of the application deadlines, just in the formal process, we'll likely have two dates. One will be end of November and one will be the end of January. So those are the kind of formal timelines, but we'll likely batch applications as they come through, and if we find we get a significant number in one batch, we might accelerate some of those timelines. But for the fast track, you don't have to wait for that end of November deadline. You can submit that application now, and we will evaluate it in the normal course of business. The next question then is, can you confirm that universities are eligible? Universities are eligible, and we did fund, as I went through that example, University of Bristol. Universities, my understanding is, can get a high level of co-funding, in some cases up to 100%. And so again, I would just suggest you check the document that Guy mentioned to you earlier, just to confirm that that's the case for you. Bear in mind, feel free, you've got the info at Carbon Trust link, so if you have any further questions, don't hesitate to come back to us through that, and we're very happy to field further questions, and we would encourage them, in fact, and again encourage fast-track applicants who feel they already have ideas. Hopefully there's plenty of opportunity for you to engage through that with us, but also at the workshops, which I recommend that people start to register for as soon as possible. Okay, well, thank you once again for your active participation and your great questions. It's great to engage with all of you. I hope you found the presentation a useful introduction to the program. its aims, what BEIS wants out of this program, the way that we're structuring it and moving forward and the different elements of it, and hopefully something around the eligibility. I want to just reiterate, what we're really after is projects, and this is not a technology-driven program, it's a project-driven program. And the idea is to get near-market innovations being tested out as quickly as possible, and hopefully to have the impact in terms of energy savings. So just wanted to reiterate that point, that we're really after good projects, and we don't want to be thought of as just an exercise around technology identification. Well, thank you once again, and we look forward to your active participation over the coming months.